Evening, everyone. It is nice to see all these names and initials on a screen. I wish we could do this in person.
Joel,
Yeah.
just before we go, perhaps we could, anyone who is trying to, I guess that's not going to help. They're not going to be able to see it. I'm going to say
Right.
we could tell people to log into the meeting, but if they can't get into YouTube, they can't see you telling you that. Forget it. Bad idea.
Well, if anyone who's listening on this call knows of other people who are planning to join the YouTube stream and watch the meeting that way, you could always drop them a text and let them know there are some technical difficulties, but the YouTube stream may begin working at some point, so they could keep trying. I guess that's probably the best we could say for now, and then this meeting being recorded can be posted. So in any case, thanks everyone for your time. We'll get started. And I've put on the screen, which I believe, can someone give me a thumbs up if that's visible? I'm sharing my screen now.
Yeah, it is.
So my name is Joel Miller, and I'm an engineer from K-Smart Associates. I've had a chance to meet with many of you on site at Betty Road, and this is an information meeting related to the project under the Drainage Act that K-Smart Associates has been working on for a number of years, and we're getting closer to the finish line on this. And so the objective of tonight is for me to provide an update to everyone as to what our findings are and what our recommendations are going to be related to drainage. And so I'll be walking through the high points of the project as efficiently as I can. We'll have lots of time for questions and comments as we go along. In fact, I would invite folks, as I'm speaking, if you're on the Zoom call and you want to ask a question, you can either interrupt me, that's fine, or you can raise your hand with the little Zoom hand thingy.
Should
And just jump right in.
on this or not?
So again, my name is Joel Miller. My contact info is here on the screen. And the first thing I'll bring your attention to, I am making on the screen the email address for Louis Desjardins from our office, who's working with me on this project. I've made it really big on the screen, so hopefully you can see that. If at the end of this meeting, in addition to talking about the design, we're going to talk about the project cost and the assessments that are going to go to landowners in the watershed under the Drainage Act, and I'll talk more about that in detail later on. If you would like to have if we were doing this meeting in person, as we customarily do, I would hand out preliminary assessment schedules near the end of the meeting, so everyone would have some idea as to what their share of the project cost would be. That's not possible with this format. So send an email to Louis now if you would like to have him send you a copy of the assessment schedules later in the meeting. So his email address is there on the screen, and if you need it pulled up later on, if you haven't written it down yet, I'll give you a couple of more seconds to do that. But yeah, just jot it down, send him a note, and then later on in the meeting, when I bring up the assessments and I'm discussing those, he'll send an email to everyone so you can have a copy of the assessments for yourself. Melanie will also have copies, and those will be available for anyone that asks. These are the preliminary assessments related to the project cost. And then also John Lindley, Drainage Superintendent for the municipality, is with us as well. On the first screen of, and this is a very rudimentary presentation. I'm with these projects and meetings like this, I think the most important thing is to convey information. And so I haven't gone out of my way to make this presentation super glitzy. So if you skipped out on the hockey game to see a glitzy presentation, I apologize, go watch the hockey game. But in any case, this is kind of a neat comparison of an aerial photograph for Betty Road from 1989. This, if perhaps you'll be able to see my little mouse hand moving along the route of the Jengra Drain. And there's not as many houses in 1989 as we have today. This is the map that was sent out with the notice for the meeting. So that's more just a point of curiosity. But again, I think it's indicative of a watershed that has had some changes, experienced some change since some of the original municipal drains under the Drainage Act were installed. So in any case, what we'll do with our time this evening, I'll, like I say, walk through some of the investigation and the findings that we are bringing to the meeting tonight. I'll be fielding questions if you have any as to the drain design or what our recommendations are. Then I'll walk through assessment calculations, And the other thing I'll mention at this stage of the game would be that I'm going to be in the neighborhood tomorrow, certainly for the first part of the day. So if you wish to meet with me on site to talk about the project, talk about what I'm recommending, or any of the items related to the project, you can either send me an email, and again, here's my contact information, jmiller@ksmart.ca, or that's my cell phone, and just send me a text or give me a call later tonight, or send me an email, and we'll set up a time to meet on site tomorrow. I'll have some availability to do that, because I think it's important that people have the opportunity to talk about the project, because it's your own backyards, it's your lands, it's your pocketbooks, your wallets, and so I want to make sure everyone has a chance, considering the format we're in, to talk about the job with me on site. So that's available as well. So if you need any of the email addresses later in the meeting, just interrupt, and we'll go that route. All right, so project timeline. We were appointed, K-Smart Associates was appointed in June 2018 by the municipality. And the original appointment was, this is a watershed as is shown on the map that was sent out. It is a watershed with quite a number of municipal drains. And so there were a number of requests submitted by landowners on the north side of Betty Road for the Jingra drain, which is highlighted here in pink on this map, for it to be improved under Section 78 of the Drainage Act. It was originally built in 1979. And so that request came in. The municipality appointed us in June 2018. We had an on-site meeting, I remember, in October of 2018, and fielded quite a bit of helpful information from everyone during the meeting, as well as after, walking around on site to better understand drainage patterns, what the needs were, what the concerns were, and that sort of thing. So we had our initial meeting there in the fall of 2018. Then in the summer 2019, there were some discussions that began related to, and I'll talk more about watershed boundaries in a moment, but related to the gully that's on the Bazinet property here towards the east end of the of Betty Road near the highway. And so there's some significant slope stability concerns there. I saw those, and so there were a number of discussions with landowners in the municipality as to how best to proceed. And this area that's shaded kind of the orangey funky color is the catchment, if you will, that drains towards that gully. And so there was, considering that there is a culvert under Betty Road here that probably many of you are already aware of, there was a petition signed by the road authority, by the municipality, to obtain an outlet for road drainage. So that was a second part of the mandate that brought K-Smart into the discussion and asked us to prepare a report under the Drainage Act to address these drainage concerns. So that was in fall of 2019. So then we, as we began our work, the first thing that we did was, as I've mentioned, we consulted quite a few of the historic reports that are in the area. So these are just screenshots of watershed plans from the Jingra drain from 79, the Argaro drain from 1986. So these were the two drains that were on that initial map, highlighted in pink, and then the Argaro drain from 1986 in blue. Those were the two drains we were asked to look into and find ways to improve under this report. So I'm just going to hop to the next screen. So first step in any drainage project is to sort out where the watershed is. So we consulted all the different historic watershed drawings and maps. These are some of the drains that are further to the west. Again, this is the area of our focus. This was the 2002 extension of the Argaro drain upstream. And so, and then there was, considering the complexity of the drainage patterns and history of drainage, extensive drainage work in this, along this road, there had been an updated map prepared in 2013 by K-Smart Associates to allow the municipality to assess out maintenance costs. And so that's just another map that we looked at to confirm whether watershed boundaries as previously shown on old drawings, match field conditions. And what you'll see in the map that was sent out in your meeting notice and the map that is going to be in my report, this boundary, as I've shown it in black dashed lines here, represents our best understanding based on our field work, our survey, and contour lines, the actual area and the hectares that get into the two drains in question. So the Xingra drain, the Argaro drain, and this new drain, due to the Section 4 petition by the municipality, called the East Drain. And that's as creative as I can get for a drain name. So if someone would like it named after them, you can send me an email later. But if you choose not to do that, I also understand. That's totally fine. So those are some of the watershed boundaries we had to look at. The next thing we did was we took a look at the Xingra drain because there was concerns about its capacity and whether it was performing up to snuff. It's a tile drain. It is downstream of the road, a 10-inch pipe. It's corrugated tubing, ag tubing, and then upstream of the road, it is 8-inch, so 200 millimeters. And what we did was we did a series of test holes, and some of you may remember that we were on site with an excavator and some cameras to locate where this buried pipe was. And it was helpful for a lot of you landowners provided us with guidance as to where to start digging. So we did locate it. We took survey shots on it to confirm what the elevations are. From those elevations and locations, then we can determine what the capacity of this drain is. And I've highlighted on this map the two drains that we were asked to look into in 3 colors: red, green, and what's the other one? Yellow. Yes. And so green is good. Yellow is okay. Red is it has issues. Kind of like Google Maps. And when we evaluate capacity for tile drains, we use a standard approach for agricultural tile drains. It's known as the drainage coefficient method. And so that's a way to calculate the capacity of a pipe to remove a certain amount of water from the catchment within a 24-hour period. And we found that the upper end of the Xingra drain, capacity-wise, and it's in terms of its slope, it is fine. There's nothing needed there from an improvement standpoint. In fact, in the yellow section, it is below current standards. We currently design tile drains for what's called the 1.5 inch drainage coefficient. It's less than that, but it's working. It needs a couple of point repairs, and I'll talk more about that later based on our camera findings. And the reason it becomes yellow there is because the slope is a bit flatter. And then further down towards the road, that 8-inch pipe picks up slope and it has quite a bit of capacity. But as soon as we get to the road, we have a pipe which is about 1/3 of the capacity that it needs to be. And so compared to what current standards are for tile drain design. So that was an important sort of piece in our process of figuring out what we should do or what ought to be done. And then in looking at the Argaro drain, it serves a much smaller area and watershed. It has a considerable amount of slope on it, and it is throughout its length, a 10-inch pipe. And so we found that it had ample capacity, and it's a newer pipe as well. So in any case, it had the capacity it needed. So that's a key takeaway. And then the next couple of slides I'll bring up here provide a zoomed in view of where we located this old pipe that was put in 1979. So on this map now, north is to the right. So we have Betty Road here, the river to the right-hand side. And beginning at the river, I'll start at the downstream end and work my way up. These little boxes, and this is a drawing that's going to be included in the report that I'm going to be filing. So if you don't see everything today, or the print's a little tiny, or you're watching it on your phone, that kind of thing, don't worry, there will be all of this information available in my report. But these little boxes indicate test hole number 1A, 1B. So these were locations where we dug up the existing pipe, and through this stretch where it's red, we're going to have a recommendation that the existing Xingra drain pipe be converted to a private drain. So it needs to be replaced. So that's why it's red. That's why it's a different color. But we dug the thing up put a camera in it as far as we could to see what condition it was in. So we find a few anomalies in terms of the slope of the pipe, some sags in the pipe here and there. There were some blockages that we found. There was certainly a blockage that everyone had informed us about down near the river a couple of years ago. And as it turns out, that was repaired.
That's what it goes.
And that was an excellent sort of step in improving the function of the existing drain. And what was done at that time was to not just repair it with the same size pipe, but we went ahead and upsized it a couple of sizes in anticipation that the old pipe wouldn't probably be large enough to start with. So that there's a section of 15-inch pipe installed to deal with that blockage a couple of years ago. So that did improve the throughput of the old drain, but it remains a drain that's old, that does have some other issues. Under the road, we found all sorts of sort of poor connections where different laterals and stubs were brought into the pipe under the road. And so, and most importantly, the holes we dug and the camera work that was done helped us even draw this on a map with some aerial photography in the background. So we can say this is where the drain is, because we start this process with a sketch like this from 1979 with property lines that look like this. And that's kind of a bit of a blank slate. So in any case, that's downstream of the road. These were the test holes we did. Then based on some other feedback we had as far as concerns, drainage issues that were brought to our attention at the first meeting. Someone's coughing. I hope you're going to be okay. Don't bother taking a test though. I think you're probably going to test negative. It seems like everyone I know is testing negative, even if they cough. But upstream of the road, like I say, it's an 8-inch pipe, and we did a number of test holes here at the Hillborn property, and then further up on this Kevin Sidock and Jingra. Don't know your partner's first name, I apologize. So in any case, we did a couple of test holes there to figure out where's the drain, what's going on, and a few issues that we're going to recommend get fixed. But the capacity of the pipe overall we found to be okay. So that was some of the investigation that we did, and I hope up till now everyone's still awake. Let me quickly move to this map, because this was another, as part of our investigation and based on input we had from folks, there was considerable discussion about whether road ditching had ever been done or undertaken that transferred water across watershed boundaries. And based on the survey we did a survey not just of the route of the drain, but also the south ditch of Betty Road and the north ditch of Betty Road, all the way to the top of the hill. And so certainly the Sidock lane there at the address is 5603. That is a high point. That's a split point in the south ditch and the north ditch, where water either comes into the drains that we're working on or it goes the other way. And so we did some investigation along those lines. And then we also reviewed Briette's laneway, and the survey we did in the south ditch here helped us to definitively say, based on existing conditions, this is where the boundary is. Water to the east of his laneway goes east, and to the west goes into the catch basin and then down the Jingra drain. So that was another piece of our investigation. These are some notes that I made along those lines. And if there's further questions about those, I can talk about them in detail, but this would have been a profile we created of the ditch on the south side of the road. So 00 here, beginning at the river, and then we come up the gully to the road, and we proceed west, shooting lots of lane culverts, all of which have slightly different elevations, grades, etc., and some sizings. And then here at the peak is Briette's laneway, and then just to the west of that is where it dips down, and we have the road culvert, and then further. And then we go from this profile to this one, and then we continue west up the hill to Sidock's laneway, and that becomes the split point for the watershed boundary, with the water to the west going into a different drain. And if you had really good eyesight, you just saw the assessment schedules. but we'll bring those up and discuss them in detail later. So one of the other questions that was asked of us in our work was, what should we do with this water? So, and I'm going to see if I have another drawing that I'd like to pull up. But before I do that, I guess I'll back up to this one. So as I mentioned, the existing Jingra drain takes water, subsurface tile water, but then downstream of Betty Road, it also handles surface water. So we're dealing with two different pieces. We have subsurface tile water where you need a deep pipe and it runs, a fair bit depending on soil moisture conditions and these kinds of things. But then a surface pipe that responds to spring melt and heavy rain events that wouldn't fit in a subsurface tile drain. So we knew without question that the Jingra drain needed to be replaced in any case from the road down to the river. So then the question just becomes, what makes sense in terms of handling the surface flows, those larger volume events? Do we continue to have them run along the swales to the river? It's not going to be reasonable to upsize pipes to handle all the surface flow down to the river, or do we look into taking that water east? And that was a suggestion that was made by a number of folks, and we were asked to look into that. So I'm going to bring up a couple of, let's see, I have a couple of other drawings that I would like to share. So again, these are drawings that show the from the Jingra drain crossing on Betty Road to the east over towards the gully. We looked into what kind of grade was available, what was the capacity of the culverts that were there, what would it take to run major surface flows to the east. Never mind whether it's a great idea, but let's just look at it from a cost standpoint. And if the numbers make sense cost-wise, then we maybe can solve some of the technical engineering tricks. So that was the north ditch profile. This is the south ditch profile. So again, all kinds of fall going that way. But what we found was that every single one of these at lane culverts would need to be replaced. Even some of the newer vintage ones wouldn't necessarily match the design grade that would be required. So you had adequate size for standard roadside culverts, as well as, because we're not just talking anymore, if we brought that surface water in the direction being considered, we weren't just handling the water that everybody's used to seeing. We'd be diverting that upper watershed a new direction in that south ditch or in that north ditch. So those culvert sizes that you see today wouldn't necessarily apply. So we looked into the hydrology, the sizing that would be required. And then we did some costing, some preliminary costing. And what we found is shown on this drawing. And I'm hoping that it's you can at least see the colors, because I'm really proud of these colors. If we were to just run the surface flow, so we still have to spend money to take the tile water north, unless we're going to put in a $430,000 storm drain that's deep enough for the tile water as well as the major surface flows. And obviously this orange option along the road, down the middle of the road, or along the road allowed somehow is not preferred. But if we were to just do ditching on the south side with culvert replacement, we estimated at least an $80,000 cost just for the surface water component. Okay, we're still going to have to spend money to deal with the tile water going in this direction. If we use the north side, it's a pretty similar number, about $85,000. If we follow the historic route with the surface flow, we're really only talking about a couple of minor changes that need to be made to the system and some allowances for right-of-way for use of land as a swale, an overflow swale, to allow that historic drainage path to be what's used. And so you can see so again, when you see these numbers of 80 or 85, you got to remember, and even 8,000, you got to remember these don't include the cost that's involved to deal with the tile water, the historic Jingra drain flows that are coming and will keep coming in this direction. And so the overall cost of the work is higher than the numbers you see here. But this was an exercise we went through just to compare what's the cost, relative cost between options to deal with surface flow, major event flow. Okay, so if there are questions about that later, I can talk about them, but again, that was based on the survey, the calculations we did. And so it's quite obvious that we needed to continue looking in terms of our recommendations at just providing, improved conveyance downstream of the road. So there's less surface water that's problematic for the landowners in this part of the watershed. So I will, I think before I get into our recommended work, I'm going to pause and ask folks if you have in. So next I'm going to talk about what we propose and what we want to do. But before I do that, up till now, I've kind of just been talking about what we found, our existing condition findings, and patterns, drainage patterns in the watershed, these kinds of things. Are there any questions for the folks that are on the Zoom call that are burning that you'd like to ask right now? I hear someone talking. I don't know if you're close enough to the tablet or laptop.
He was just talking to me. Sorry.
Okay, fair enough. No worries. No worries at all. I really only paused to invite questions so that I could have a drink of water. That was the real reason. Okay, well, I'll just carry on. And again, feel free to interrupt as I proceed. So I'm going to now bring up our drawing set and try to walk through what we propose, what we propose for the work. And again, it's work. I've talked fairly extensively about the Jingra drain and this watershed and the watershed splits, but it would also involve the proposed work for the addressing the gully stability issue at the east end of the road and the catchment that drains to what we were calling the east drain. So I'll now go into a bit of discussion on what our recommendations are. So if I can now get to our drawing set, this is the map you've all seen. What we recommend is that the existing pipe, I hope no one's getting motion sickness. We recommend that the existing pipe from the road, from Briette's lawn, where it cuts diagonally between the pine trees, under the road, diagonally across Renee's yard, and then Peter's, Joey's, and
Andre,
yes,
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I apologize.
Okay.
A lot of names here. We are recommending that pipe go from being a 10-inch piece of bag tubing to 12-inch or 300 millimeter diameter smooth wall pipe. So that may seem like not a huge change. We're going from a 10-inch pipe to a 12-inch pipe. The reality is a couple of things. First of all, the 12-inch pipe does bring the drainage standard for this drain up to current practice. So that puts the whole drain into the green. Okay, so that's the first thing. The other comment I'll make is that the capacity of a 10-inch tubing versus this 12-inch smooth wall pipe, the 12-inch actually gives you over 2 times more capacity than the existing pipe. So we're more than doubling the capacity downstream of just the Jingra drain. We're bringing it up to current standards, and in doing so, we're more than doubling its capacity. So that's encouraging. I think that's significant. And it's, I think, also quite significant for folks who, since the repair was done a couple of years ago, have observed that, the old 10-inch has handled most of the events since then. So just imagine a system with twice the capacity. Certainly, it's not an exorbitant or an extravagant type of upgrade. It is bringing it up to current standards, and it's more than doubling its capacity. So that's what our recommendation is. And then the other thing we're proposing is to realign the drain. So instead of running diagonally as we've shown, we'll square it off at the road allowance with a couple of catch basins here. We'll tie into and I'm going to start at the upstream end. Oh, sorry. So here's a picture of the connection we'll make at Briette's Field to the existing tile. We'll abandon the portion that runs diagonally through the lawn and the trees due to root concerns over time. Square it off, have a catch basin here to take south ditch flow coming from the west, have another catch basin again in the low ground to replace the existing catch basin. And then going under the road and then downstream of the road, we're going to follow a path that is considerably closer to the low run, the swale that's on Renee's yard there. And then this section of the pipe will be abandoned. So it won't have any more status under the Drainage Act. And the idea here too would be that we're consolidating the location of the drain. So we already have the Arga Road drain coming from the west, where my hand is. We have the overflow swale from the road culvert. So the road culvert will be replaced here as well. And then we'll have new catch basins on each side. So the overflow swale, along with the drain pipes, are now all in a tighter corridor as opposed to kind of being spread out. At the time, a lot of these drains were built, it was 100% farmland. So it made sense to, go in a straight line or maybe not take the path that we're recommending. But at this stage in the history of the watershed, it's best if we can bring these drain corridors as tight as we can, just to improve usability of the property for the landowners. So as we get to the property line with Renee and Peter, we set a catch basin here, and then we continue to cross with the 300 pipe, another catch basin with the property line with Joey and Peter here. And then here again is a significant revision in the alignment really across all three properties, but bringing the new 12-inch pipe much closer to the existing swale and the existing Arga Road drain. So we're not sort of monopolizing such a wide footprint of this private land using it for drainage. We're creating a tighter drain corridor to improve usability of the land, and it doesn't change the design or add cost to the project to do so. And then near the downstream end of Joy's property and across to Andre's, we'll follow the existing drain alignment, and that's what's shown here. So that is the proposed pipe drain downstream of the road. Catch basins, a new 12-inch pipe. We hook in. So the old drain that's there will remain in place. Landowners have asked for that. I'll be speaking with Renee over the coming days to find out what his wishes are on this one. And Sean, you and I will have a detailed conversation as to what we do with this older pipe under the road. My hunch is it should probably come out since we'll be digging up the road anyway, or it'll be blocked. And then I've spoken with Peter, and that this drain will become private. It'll be his to look after in the future for maintenance, this older pipe, but he wishes for it to remain there. It'll be tied in at the property lines. And the other thing we'll be doing is an interconnection between the Arga Road drain and the new 12-inch. And the new 12-inch is going to be deeper than the Arga Road drain. So it will be the preferred location for flow. However, if there's ever an event where one of the two pipes has extra capacity, then they both can work in concert once we've provided an interconnection here. And that won't have any adverse upstream effect, because if both are full, then the surface spillover location will remain this path along the drain across Peter's lawn. That's what he and I discussed. So, and then the same story applies at this property line. We'll tie in the old drain, and if the pipes are at full capacity, if we're experiencing a significant rain event, then there would be an opportunity for the excess water to boil out of the catch basin and take the valley, the swale, on downstream.
What would be that event?
What would be that event? So John Lindley is here with me in our Sudbury office, case warrant Sudbury office, and his question related to the the design storm So what we've found in our modeling was that the 12-inch pipe, and I'm gonna need to, thanks a lot, John, asking me a question that I don't have at the tip of my tongue. Yeah, you better apologize. So what we're finding with just the 300, this would be roughly the 2-year event can be handled in the pipe, and anything above that would go overland if it's a textbook design storm, synthetic design storm. But I think it's significant to just sort of revisit the fact that the old 10-inch has been working well for the last couple of years, and hasn't even come close to overflowing. And we'll put in a pipe with an interconnection that's, you know, kind of more than twice the capacity what's there. So that's the recommendation as far as sizing is concerned. So will there be surface water during extreme events? Yes, and that remains the case unless folks have money to spend and want to spend it on pipes. Then that's what my recommendation is. It certainly is a massive improvement over the current situation, and it brings it into sort of current standard drain design. Then, so that's probably enough excitement downstream of the road. I will then just hop to this next drawing. That'll be part of the drawing set that just illustrates a couple of point repairs that we recommend doing based on our camera work when we did our test holes. We did find that there was some issues with the existing drain near the fence line here. There's a blind inlet to the south, sort of a Werner style catch basin with a bunch of rocks, soak away hole with a tile connection to the drain in this area. So found a few items in the pipe that slow it down. So just a short amount of pipe replacement is going to be needed to bring that back to its full function. As well as, you know, some rocks and some issues with the pipe right around here. So just local amounts of point repairs there, not wholesale pipe replacement. So that work is part of the proposed project as well, just to get, and that's in some ways sort of maintenance type work, just to bring that up to function. And then again, this is the road crossing on the Jingra drain. So catch basins on both sides, offset to help reduce issues with freezing during the winter. And Sean, you and I can fine tune some of those details as we need to before we finalize the design. Drawing wise, it won't affect costs necessarily. And then replace the road culvert pipe while we have the road dug up. It's pretty old vintage pipe. It's crushed on one end. Still works, but it ought to be replaced while we have the world while we've dug a big hole here. Okay, so that's recommended work on the Jingra drain. Can I'm just going to open it up for questions on that before I move on to talk about what we recommend for the east drain. So any questions?
Hello?
Yeah, hello?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, before the west drain, which is the Jingra drain,
Yep.
okay, that all took all of the land and all of the issues that were in or on Betty Road, but now that drain is compromised at all on the north side. What changed in the issue not for the drain to be able to take what goes downstream to the west on Betty Road?
Okay, yeah, no, that's a good question, and I'm not 100% sure who's asking it, but that's can I ask who was posing that question?
Yes, it was Brad Master.
Brad. Okay. Hi, Brad. I don't know that we've met yet. It's nice to meet you. No, that's a good question. So what brought some of the drainage concerns to the fore at the beginning of this project, quite obviously, was a significant root blockage down near the outlet of this tile. and that's been repaired. So that was a considerable source of some of the aggravation and flooding issues and slow drainage that were observed a few years ago. Okay. So that was just sort of a natural issue, if you will, right? Pipes need maintenance. We have a drain that's 45 years old, plus or minus. So that was one of the things. So then the other question you asked is whether or not there have been other recent changes downstream of Betty Road that have compromised the pipe that's there. And based on what we cameraed, I say the answer is no. We saw some sags in the pipe, which is not an uncommon thing related to construction. Sometimes, grade isn't perfect. So we saw some sags in the pipe. There was some monkey business going on here at the property line, and I'm not 100% sure. There was some filter cloth. We thought for a while it might have been a dead animal. So there was a partial obstruction here as well at the property line. In terms of conveyance, the main issue, and then there are issues under the road with the existing tile that we saw in the camera footage. So those were, from a conveyance standpoint, those were concerns we've had. And then there were, like I say, some of the anomalies in terms of sags in the grade, little bellies in the pipe, and that sort of thing. And then the other item that required some attention, and it has been rectified. I don't know if it happened before we started our work or around the time we started our investigation or during it, but Peter's laneway that was constructed here had a couple of different elevation levels based on sort of the phasing of construction. And we have surveyed that, and in its current state, it's paved at the moment. In its current elevation, it is as flat across his laneway as the elevation of the swale and the overflow route at the property line. So there were, at one point in time, some questions as to the flow capacity. I think it may have been a couple of things going on at once. You had blockages in the old pipe, and then you also had some phasing in terms of construction here that has been sort of brought to completion with a driveway elevation now that's lower than the swale elevation. So I don't know if Brad, I don't know if I've 100% answered your question, but that's my understanding.
If the, excuse me, if I can, if the
Yeah, sure.
road drain was functioning before,
Yeah.
And now because it's not functioning as well, or there are issues, then does that not divert water down Betty Road to the other drain, to the
Yeah, that's a good question. And so the answer is no, it doesn't. So when the Zhengrad drain was not working, none of the troublesome water went to the east, because this is a high point. And that was something we illustrated here on our profile, okay? So on this profile, this is the road culvert. And unless Briette's laneway ever overtopped, and my understanding is that it never did, water never went east over the hump of his laneway with no culvert into the south ditch further towards your land, which is these two culverts here. You have a pair of 24-inch pipes. So these would be yours right here, Brad. So there was no time when the drain function was sort of substandard where water came to the east. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I guess, but just the properties, including mine next door, last summer they came in and did extensive repairs to my neighbors, and they did the repairs, I guess, before I even moved in, before 2019, to my property, and all of this was done without any kind of if I understand correctly, a plan, an altered existing drain plan. Is that correct?
It sounds to me like your culverts were installed or replaced and other culverts were installed or replaced as would be the normal custom for lane culverts along a road.
They doubled in size or tripled in size on our side of the road,
Mhm,
on the south side versus the north side.
mhm.
Almost all the culverts or drainage issue for the land is level or very little ditching done in front of those.
Okay, yeah, I'm not 100% familiar with. I've been chatting with well, I was chatting with Joey. He filled me in on a few of the lane culverts that have been replaced. In I believe last summer there were a couple that were replaced. One of the long ones that has a catch basin here. So it would not have been a requirement for any of these lane culvert replacements to adhere to my drainage scheme or the Jingrod drain demand, I guess you could say, runoff demand, because historically the Jingrod drain all crossed the road over at Briette's property through the road culvert.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I guess all I'm saying is that now because that drain isn't working as well or whatever, that the
Yep.
water's diverted to the east more so than it ever was before. And that was the reason that they had to put in, 24-inch drains in front of my house in order to take the additional water flow, which wasn't an issue before.
Well, unless I have not been informed that there's ever been an overtopping of the watershed break right here at this laneway, where water ponded to such a depth in this yard that it then overtopped and went cruising to the east. So the sizes that were chosen for those culverts would have been sort of outside of sort of our analysis as it relates to conveyance of drainage from the upstream Jingrod drain watershed, for sure. I think you're asking a good question, but that's what my understanding is.
So if things were changed, then there's a significant cost that's going to be downloaded to the north or south side of Betty Road.
Absolutely. And that was you're 100% right. And that's why our recommendation is not to do that. That's why when I put this options map up here, I was looking at surface flow, and because there were folks asking the question, should we run the water to the east? So we looked at it, we surveyed the culverts, we said, what theoretical culvert size are we going to need to meet a minimum standard for lane culverts to take that upper watershed, which is these lands here, and instead of taking the natural path historically, we drag it east. Our analysis was that's not a good idea. It's not the way it's been done. It's not the way any of the watersheds historically drew the boundary. Historically, and even going back to 1979, there was I don't agree 100% with this line here, but the point is that historically there was always the path for this upper Jingrod drain watershed was to cross the road at Briette's and go to the river. So definitely, I agree with you. There would be cost offloaded to the folks. You'd have larger culverts, you'd have more flow, and you'd be participating more in the cost for the Jingrod drain if we brought the water that way. So it didn't make any sense from a dollars and cents standpoint. So we're not recommending that. So the reason that these lands are in, and I apologize if I'm hopping around too much here. The reason these lands are highlighted orange. So one of the things I'm going to explain here is that I have a major outer catchment boundary, and that's this bold dashed line. And then we have little sub catchments within the big catchment where some water goes one way, some goes another way. And we split the drain into sections, and certain sections of the drain serve particular subcatchments. And so in any case, we have a subcatchment line that crosses Betty Road at Briette's Lane. And based on our survey, based on my understanding, based on the design we're doing for capacity and calculations and flow, this is a boundary that we recommend keeping as is. The status quo should be maintained. No lane culvert here. Water goes in two different directions at that point. It's a split point. So thanks for that.
Wasn't the attempt to fix this issue was digging the south drains out more in front of my house in Bouffard's, and so that cost was done because I guess what I'm trying to understand is how is that cost okay then, and the municipality covers it, but now we're going to have to cover the cost of redoing a great portion of it.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So maybe Sean, if you're on the call, if you're familiar with some of the road ditching that was done in here, my guess would be the road ditching was done to improve the function of the road ditch just for the existing catchment that it serves. So that's kind of standard road ditch maintenance work. Maybe there was, people were concerned that the ditch needed a clean out or needed some additional capacity. And so for this existing catchment, I've never discussed with Sean or, the municipality has always been under the understanding that these historic watershed divides are important and are good to maintain. And so I believe that would have just been standard road ditching work.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, Joel.
Right.
The work on Betty Road. So we have our capital planning. We always enhance drainage, change culverts, give the road time to settle on that year, and then we do granular resurfacing the subsequent year. So that's exactly what happened on Betty Road.
Okay.
If I may comment on the sizing of the entrance culverts. I do believe that these sizes were kind of, there were bigger culverts flowing into smaller culverts. So I think they were kind of all sized and I'm going back a few years, so I'm going off memory, but there were some kind of capacity issues where the ditches in the spring were at capacity. So we kind of, some of the culverts were installed at a little bit larger diameter. Nonetheless, we didn't increase the flow in that section of road, or we didn't, the larger the culvert is, the slower the velocity, right? And so technically, I don't think that it changed anything for the road drainage, but of course, Public Works, we look at the road drainage and we don't look at draining private properties, or we don't look at draining farmland, or that's why we're at the point where we are today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there was the catchment was the contributing catchment area was never enlarged or altered necessarily. It was just upgrades to the ditch cross section or pipe sizes to improve flow.
Correct.
So if that was the case and it's improved the flow, then why are the costs of what you're proposing here being downloaded on the landowners if what's already done was sufficient? And now the issue, which is the drain going north from Betty Road by Highway 64 into the river, that's where all the issue for this came from, because there was a much larger flow of water than before, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, no, I would say it's all the same water. The catchment hasn't changed. If someone came in here and put a Walmart up in this field and brought more flow this way, then we'd say there's more flow. It's all the same water. It's how it moves along a road ditch can be changed incrementally, improving efficiency in these kinds of things. But I guess what you've asked is a great question, Brad, because it transitions into the recommendations I do have for the East Drain. And the fundamental answer to your question as to why this sub-watershed that's in orange here will contribute to the cost of the east drain has nothing to do with road ditching. There could be zero road ditch here. And this catchment would still be the area that flows to the east drain and accessible under the Drainage Act. So the maintenance work done by the municipality as part of road maintenance and assessments under the Drainage Act, creation of a new municipal drain, and assessing affected landowners accordingly. That's just a standard piece of the legislative process for the Drainage Act. So what I'll do, and we'll talk more about assessments later, so this isn't necessarily the end of the topic. It is just sort of a partial response to your question. It's related to the Drainage Act, and under the Drainage Act, there are different ways that people pay. If you're near the work and it's a tangible benefit to the property, there's a benefit assessment. If you're in the watershed, then you pay based on the land area that you contribute to the project, and that's called an outlet assessment. So I'll get more into those details later. But as we took a closer look at and I'm gonna get to the proper drawing here, as we took a closer look then at the gully and the slope stability issues that we found there, what we are recommending for the gully, it takes water from that orange catchment, which adds up to, I believe it's around 13 hectares, something like that.
Sorry, can I interrupt, Joel?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Sorry, Brad.
Yes.
The issue with the east end of the road, because nobody said it yet, is that there actually was no municipal drain there.
Oh, right.
So what Joel was trying to say is that the water in that catchment area was always there. The digging of the ditch on the south side didn't increase the amount of water, but it made it go faster. And then it crossed under the road into what you're seeing there as the east drain, which was actually private property.
Right.
And now we come to the picture that Joel wants to show you about how they intend to rectify the east drain, which is now going to be a municipal drain.
Thanks, Diane, for that summary. That's very helpful at this juncture. So we had a gully that was on private land that over the years had changed as gullies do, and it was taking flow from this catchment. So the recommendation that we've put together for this type of a scenario is to put the flow in a pipe to backfill the gully, not necessarily level full, but to provide, like we always do with a pipe system, a combination of a pipe with an overflow swale for the major event. And so on the profile, I'll illustrate this. On the left-hand side is Betty Road, an existing 3-foot diameter pipe, corrugated steel. Our proposal is for the municipal drain to extend to the upstream side of the road. So the culvert will be incorporated as part of the drain. No work needed, but it becomes an outlet, a location for water to enter. And then downstream of the road, we would set a catch basin and then run a 24-inch pipe, not necessarily in the bottom of the gully. We're going to just go in a straight line because I like straight lines. And it makes sense. It's easiest. I don't have straight lines everywhere on these drawings, any of you would notice, but in this case, from a topographic standpoint, there's no reason to follow the arc of the existing ditch. And we'll put a swale.
And the reason you're doing that is because of erosion.
And the reason we're doing all of this is related to erosion. John Lindley's over here in the corner of the room, and I wish you could all see him because he's puts his hand up like this and he says, Joel, there's an obvious comment you need to make. So just say it. And we have erosion. I did not include in my presentation pictures necessarily of some of the slope instability, but it's definitely there. And I think one of the things I'm going to mention at this stage, because it helps explain the recommendations in our design, is at the bottom of this profile, we have a little triangle symbol, and that shows the water level on the day we surveyed it. And then this dashed line is the bottom of the gully that we surveyed in late 2018. It happens to be a gauge, a water level gauge on the bridge right there at the highway. And so there are natural fluctuations, as everyone knows, in the river water surface elevation annually. So there's a recorded minimum elevation, a recorded maximum elevation, and then the rest of the time it fluctuates in between. So what this helps us know from a design standpoint is that slope stability issues in this private gully are brought on by two contributing factors. One, obviously, is the flow of water from the upstream lands, from that orange catchment that I showed. But then another contributing reality to this is just the nature of the outlet and is fluctuating water levels in the river backwater. So what would happen is if the river is at this elevation on a particular day, if we go to 2018 around the time this project started, you can see in 2018 the high water level was around 200.5. So that basically would show backwater partway up the gully, fairly close, backwatering, not moving fast necessarily in those conditions because the ditch is full. But the point is that the river fluctuates. And so in our design, we can't just dump a pipe at a random location and then not protect the outlet, because these slopes will be subject to the saturation that occurs when the river water level comes up and down. And as barbed clay goes, that weakens its cohesiveness. And so there's a need to protect the outlet with a considerable amount of riprap that we've done at other river municipal drain outlets in river situations like this. And so there's going to be some pretty big stone near the outlet, over a couple of tons each. We need a big anchor for the riprap outlet structure using toe stones between 2 and 3 feet in diameter, couple of tons. And so that will be how the whole bottom end of the system holds in place as the river comes up and down. And then we would armor more or less the outlet of the pipe here, which is in from the river. So we're not sticking a pipe out into the river cross section. In this case, we are protecting the outlet inland from the main flow of the river with this riprap outlet. And the concept then would be with the pipe taking a straight path, the new center line of the swale more or less parallel to the pipe, and then near the outlet a ramp that would allow equipment to access the outlet and do future maintenance if needed. And then, like I say, the cross section of the ravine, if you're really into cross sections, then you're my friend. If you're not, you're still my friend. But these cross sections would illustrate, for example, the situation we have right now at the lane for Linda and Dennis. So this particular cross section is really exciting. It's taken right here at Station 53. So this is a place where their lane, where they park, is quite close to the top of the slope of the gully. And so our recommendation would be that the gully be filled, and then where we have a steep and unstable slope close to where they're parking, there would just be lawn as an overflow swale with an access route for future maintenance. And then the pipe just gets buried in the native material further to the east. So that's the overall design concept there. That pipe design can handle the 50-year storm. So again, it's not really a case where we're over designing necessarily. This is the type of outlet infrastructure that needs to just work, carry the water away, and not require tweaking or babysitting down the road. And so that's the recommendation we have for that part of the system. So the East Drain, unless someone gives me a more creative name, that's what we intend to call it. So any questions on the East Drain?
I don't think anybody wants their name on it.
Okay. Then East Drain it will stay.
Linda, I leave that one to you, but I don't think so.
No, no, no.
So the issue with the east drain, again, is because the homes are so close, the buildings are so close to where that gully is. If the water continues to flow at the speed it's flowing into that drain, it is going to put homes and buildings at risk. And so for water to continue to be piped under the road and onto that property, something has to be done to prevent further collapse.
Yeah, yeah. And so, and then there's the real important, significant piece to the story too, which is that it's a private gully now. And so there's recognition, there's a priority for the municipality in this particular case to ensure that there's good conveyance for drainage, not just from the road, but also from all the lands that contribute flow into this system. So, you know, in terms of relative flow contributions, you know, these little ovals on our map represent the affected hectares in a particular, and we round things off to the nearest tenth in this kind of land drainage, large scale land drainage work that we do, rounded off to the nearest tenth of a hectare. So these are the contributing areas that flow to that gully. So the road represents a fairly small slice of the actual runoff contribution, but in any case, that's part of the outlet assessment that we'll talk more about later. Okay, I'm going to now, because I think that are there any more questions on the design? I want to move to the project cost and assessments, and then we'll try to wrap things up. If you haven't yet and you'd like to have a copy of the assessment schedules emailed to you, I'll pull up Louis' email address again. Have you gotten some hits from people? So we've had one request so far for an emailed copy of the assessment schedule. Let me bring up his email address. It's right here. So I'll just leave it up there for 30 seconds. So if you want to drop Louis a note and ask him to send you a copy of the schedules, we'll be sending those out shortly, and they'll be available. These are the preliminary breakdown of the project costs. So while I leave that up there, one of the things that's required under the Drainage Act when you assess costs is that the cost for the project is not only the construction cost, it's not only the engineering cost, it's not only the agency permitting costs. So this was a job that was submitted to DFO, and we've had those approvals taken care of environmentally. But there's also the need, as appropriate, when a drain exists on private property, to compensate landowners for land taken for the purposes of the drain. So oftentimes, and this is true and applicable in this watershed, where you have a pipe drain under a farm property, historically allowances for land taken, and an allowance would be compensation to the owner of the land, sort of like paying for an easement, not exactly the same, but similar idea. Landowners are compensated for land used for the drain, whether it's for a ditch, historically, because a pipe drain under a farm field didn't adversely affect use of the land above the pipe, allowances often were not given. But under this report, where land is being used for the drain, allowances are provided to the landowners based on the amount of the land that's used. So the details of those calculations will be in my report, but you'll see on some of the assessment schedules that we distribute shortly that the allowances are part of the computation of what folks owe. So let me, did you get more takers on your email, Louis? No more takers, that's okay. What I'd like to do now is show this slide that summarizes the overall project cost. Okay, so there will be detailed cost information in my report. I'll break out the quantities of pipe, the quantities of catch basins, how much for seeding, how much for allowances, all the details of the project cost will be in my report. But where we sit today, based on the work we've discussed, we're estimating a $324,000 project. Okay. What you see on this slide is a high level breakdown of where the project cost is being assessed. So on the Zhengra drain, we're practically at an even split between the landowners north of the road, south of the road, and then the road itself. So the municipality pays for this row here called Betty Road. So you can see those percentage breakdowns. On the east drain, assessments are shown in this way. North of the road owing, 11 grand. South of the road, due to that outlet assessment, I'll talk more about that in a minute, 25,000, and the road authority paying close to 80. So that's where the total project cost at a high level lands. Now, as I've kind of alluded to, your assessments are a function of two things. Does the drainage works bring value to your property? Does the work we're proposing to do benefit you? So if that's the case, then I've assessed a benefit assessment to that property. And then if you have a large parcel, then your outlet assessment is a higher number compared to a smaller parcel. And one of the things I'm going to illustrate real quickly at this stage is I want to just highlight the fact that under the Drainage Act, you pay only for the portion of the drainage works that your water uses, that your land flows to. So in the case of the east drain, the entire orange catchment makes use of the east drain. Your water goes that way. And so the east drain is just a single short drain. It's a single interval. When we take a longer drain where you have properties north of the road, south of the road, it's not the case that a landowner in this part of the watershed makes use of the drainage works up here. So any cost, for example, on this job to do these repairs, those costs are not, there's no contribution for that work, the interval within this, the interval of the drain up here, by folks that live down here. The converse of it means this: if you live near the upstream end of a drain, you need the entirety of that system to function for your water to have outlet. And so when you're near the upstream end of a municipal drain, you require access to a longer system. So your outlet assessment for your area pays a portion of the cost for each interval. So in this drain, there are 3 intervals. One interval goes from the river to this property line between Peter and Renee. The next interval then goes from that property line to the upstream side of the road, the Priettes. And then the third interval is this interval where no work is being done aside from some maintenance. So that is the high level explanation as to how assessments are calculated. Basic principle, you're assessed for benefit plus outlet, and you pay into the portion of the drain that you use. And typically what happens is we take the estimated cost for an entire interval, then we take the portion of that interval's cost that's assessed as benefit, we subtract it off, and then there's a remainder. So if we're going to do $50,000 of work, say, and 25% of it is going to be assessed as benefit assessment to the people who benefit from the work, there's still $25,000 yet to be assessed out. So that remainder gets spread out to anybody whose water contributes to it as outlet assessment based on land area. So that is the explanation for outlet assessment. Let me bring up my table of, where was it? Did I close it? I did. Just a second. So, again, I think I've shown everyone this. So when you can see a split like this on the Zhengra drain, where north of the road, significant amount of that assessment would be benefit assessment. South of the road, obviously significant amounts are outlet. Finally, there are two schedules I'm going to bring up. The first one is called gross assessment. It's Schedule A. So it's what is your total outlet, what is your total benefit, and what are you going to owe based on our estimated cost. And then net assessment takes your gross assessment and then it subtracts off anything that reduces your assessment. So your assessment can be reduced if you're owed allowances by the project, if we use the land for the drain, or if there are crop damages. So in this case, allowances for right-of-way are made for the pipe and swale system north of Betty Road. For the existing agricultural tile drain at the south of Betty Road, there's no allowances for right-of-way that I'm recommending. It would just add cost to that interval. It doesn't adversely affect the use of those properties now. And it would add cost to that interval, which you would turn around and have to pay because that's the interval. Those are the parties that would be involved in paying for that interval. And then if properties have the farm property tax class status, then there can be grant, up to 2/3 grant eligible. So all the work on this project is grant eligible. And that's another thing that we looked into as we did our design recommendations. And then Schedule C then would show what your out-of-pocket estimated cost is. All right, so Louis is going to hit send to the one lucky person that asked for an electronic copy. The rest of you, 3 now. Oh my goodness. Sound like hotcakes. Here is the here are the estimated assessment schedules. So there's a separate for each property. So this is Schedule A. So on the far right hand side, we have 324,000. And that represents the summation of what each property owes with roll numbers shown here. I apologize, there's one property where I still need to get the property owner's name, but the roll number is listed there and shown on the map. It's the folks who own the piece immediately east of Sidock. And so, as I've said here, the assessment to each property is the sum total of benefit. Section 24 and 26 benefit is something a little unique, and I'll just summarize it to say it only applies to the road in this project. So the extra cost to deal with the road for the work we're doing is assessed directly to the road under Section 26 of the Drainage Act. So that's why, for example, for the Jingrod drain work, we've got just under $40,000 worth of work that needs to happen related to the road that's due to the presence of the road. So it's an increased cost, and that's paid directly by the municipality, not by the landowners. So then once we take the total cost, we subtract off the benefit, the remainder gets prorated based on land area as outlet assessment. So that's shown here. And what I'll just point out here is that the ratios between benefit and outlet that I'm using on this job are ratios that are commonly used by drainage engineers under the Act. And so that's one of the reasons why the costs are spread the way they are, why there's a certain amount of benefit assessed, why there's a certain amount of outlet assessed. And then the east drain here shown. So for example, many properties whose water does not enter the Jingrod drain are not assessed on it. There's no cost. Their cost is only, they're only participating in the project cost due to the east drain. So then the other schedule that exists that'll be part of my report is Schedule C. So again, this brings over from Schedule A the total estimated assessment. This is an estimated assessment. At the end of the project, the total assessment will be updated based on actual cost. So if the project, by the time we finish construction and the whole 9 yards, and we go to build the job out, if we're 3% over the estimate, then all these estimated assessments will be 3% over what the estimate was. So the project is paid for based on actual cost. And the other important thing to mention is that bills are sent out and the cost is levied at the end of construction. So that will be sometime from now. I will talk a little bit about schedule in a moment. Then if a property has a little F over here on the left-hand side of this table, that would suggest they're eligible for the 2/3 grant through the province. So these are the amounts of grant. If properties receive allowances, those are listed here. And I'm going to speak to those because I think they'll raise some questions in people's minds, and there will be more details in my report about it. But the basic concept for an allowance is how much. Now there's some of the smaller allowances for the agricultural properties at the top end relate, like I say, just to damages due to the work that's going to happen on the property. If there's crops there at the time we have to do the repairs, or if there's incidental damage to the property, those amounts fairly standard for that kind of work. Where the drain exists in my report downstream of Betty Road. So this applies to the Zhengra drain and to the east drain. Land is being taken. Land is being designated for use. It's not taken away from the landowners, but its use is designated for drainage purposes. Whether it's for the physical drain itself, the pipe or the riprap or whatever, or if it's for a corridor along the drain to do future maintenance as needed and initial construction. So those are fairly straightforward calculations in terms of the land area required for that. So someone who has a long section of the drain on their property and a wide section of the drain on their property will have higher allowances than someone with a shorter amount of the drain on their property, or a place within the drainage works where the corridor of the drain is much narrower. Okay, so that's why, for example, you see considerable variation in these. These are all calculated based on area. A common land value is used across the board, and so that's where those are calculated from. So net assessments then are shown in the final column. So this would be if the project comes in and it's all said and done around 324,000, then a bill would be sent to the owner of these properties at the time we levy the cost. If any of these properties change hands during the project, they sell, it would be the new owner that pays the bill. So it's the Drainage Act assessment is levied to the owner of the land at the time the bills are sent. So it's important to do some due diligence if you're in a real estate transaction and disclose any of this information. Always recommended. People don't always do it. I've talked to many buyers that discovered they were purchasing a piece of land that was in the middle of a Drainage Act process. So that is the crux of what I wanted to present related to assessments. There'll be more details in my report, but those are at a high level where we land. Any questions related to assessments?
I have a question. Joel, can you show me the other map where it shows the numbers, circle number of your?
Yep. The little hectares.
Okay, yeah, I want to see what my number is.
Is 0.2.
So I have 0.02 and 0.04.
Well,
is that what you add those two together? 0.6?
Actually, the 0.2 would be the area of your yard that slopes. So only from your driveway to the east would go into the drain. And then on the east side of it as well, that would slope towards this swale. So for you, your hectares are 0.2. That's what we measured. And then Diane is just a very minuscule sliver of the property that would slope into the drain, and it's 0.04.
So the thing is, I don't understand 0.2, how you figure out $10,000.
Yeah, so the 0.2 hectares is based on the area that we measure that's in the watershed. But then remember, assessments are based on two things. They're based on benefit as well as outlet. So the 0.2 for you contributes to your outlet assessment. So if I go back to Schedule A, and we look at your row here, which is this one, and I think there's a way to. There. So your outlet assessment is only 255 bucks.
Mhm.
Where your benefit comes in, which is significant, is $9,500.
Mm.
And the basis for that is through this project, there's a considerable chunk of your property that you're actually gaining, if you will, because the gully is being backfilled. And the same is happening on some of the other landowners north of Betty Road. As we consolidate that drain corridor and make it more efficient from a land use standpoint, they're, in essence, the benefit they're deriving from this project is they're gaining land that was previously rendered sterilized, if you will, because the drain's going everywhere. In your case, you had a gully. So that's the basis for this benefit assessment. It's land, if you will, the use of land being gained. So in your assessment, there's those numbers and they all add up to 9755. And then if we go to the next page, what we see is that same 9755 shows up. And then, like I was saying, the value of land being taken or designated for use for the drain on your property, I've calculated at this number. So that puts your net cost at that number.
Okay.
And then if we look at some of the other upstream folks in the east drain, I know Brad, you were on the call earlier talking, so this would be your property. So there's no benefit, like if we looked at some of the other properties upstream of the road, there's no benefit assessment to any of those properties. They're just strictly paying for an outlet assessment based on land size. So a larger parcel would pay a larger amount. So the couple of the smaller pieces that are 0.3 hectares are paying just under 400 bucks outlet assessment. Now, it's quite apparent, if you haven't noticed, probably Sean has, that the municipality is paying a considerable benefit assessment for the east drain. And that's an amount that when we have road superintendent petitions, each project is different and they need to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. But if we were to go to here, at a high level on the east drain, about 70% of the cost is borne by the road authority. So my rule of thumb when I'm doing road superintendent petitions in cases like this would be for that number to be 70 to 90%. So that's where I land. But in this case, there's certainly value, there's certainly benefit also, derived by your property due to the stability improvements. But there's no question that the upstream watershed needs to contribute through outlet assessment. So that is, and as I said to someone earlier this week, in calculating assessments, I realized that's the reason you guys are all here is to find out what your number is going to be. I can understand that folks do not agree necessarily with how I've assessed the project. My duty is to be fair and in my best judgment to make a decision in a consistent with the requirements under the act. So let me just walk through where we go from here. Is there will be we have some field work to do tomorrow. I'll be available if you want to reach out to me. My information's on the screen. In the very near term, I will be trying to finalize my report and file it with the municipality, because the intent, we were kind of sidelined with COVID there for a while, but the intent would be to move the project along, potentially to move to construction this year yet. So the steps in the process are as follows. I finish my report, I file it with the municipality. That report will have more or less all the content we've discussed tonight. It'll have additional details on how assessments are calculated. It'll have the construction specs. It'll have detailed drawings. A copy of that report will be mailed to each one of you. Everybody assessed in this watershed will get a copy of the report. A couple of weeks later, after you get the report, there will be a council meeting where that report will be considered. And that's a standard part of the process under the Drainage Act. Council will have the decision to make whether to to adopt the report or not. If they adopt the report, it will be a provisional bylaw will be given 2 readings. So after it goes to council, then a few weeks later, there will be something called a court of revision, which is a panel locally of landowners who understand the Drainage Act, who, if you are not satisfied with the assessment to your property that's in my report, that will be your venue, and you'll be notified in the mail. That would be your venue to file an appeal to have your assessment changed by the court of revision. So again, I would say we look to see my report at council. I don't have a crystal ball, but the goal is for it to be at council within the next month, not much longer than that, unless there are unforeseen reasons that it would be delayed. About a month after that, there would be a court of revision meeting where assessments can be changed. Then about a month after that, if there are no further appeals, then the bylaw would be given 3rd reading. And once that occurs, we can tender the project out. So it'll go through a standard tendering process with the municipality for the standard competitive bidding process, and then award construction and hopefully build it during the dry part of the year this year. So that's the hope. So any other questions on anything I've said?
Yes, Joel, it's Brad. I was just looking at the 2016 assessment, and there was never a drain other than the Gingras drain ever tabled or registered for this tract of land, ever.
Yes, that's true. You when you say that your 2016 tax bill?
Well, it said 2016 on the screen.
Oh, this is the year of the aerial photography. That's what those years are. So 1989 was the year they took that air photo, and then 2016 was the year of this air photo. So that was just kind of a comparison. So, but back to your question, and it's a very good one. Historically, your parcel, and if I actually have the map I need to illustrate this, historically, your parcel was not part of a municipal drain watershed. Okay, so this would be you right here. You see that?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is until my report came along, this was the most current watershed map for Betty Road. Based on the existing drainage works at the time this report was prepared in 2013, there was no municipal drain downstream of your land. You were not in a municipal drain watershed. As of the new petition for a new drainage works to be called the East Drain, your parcel is now proposed to be within a municipal drain watershed. So historically, you're correct. You're not part of any municipal drain watershed, but downstream of your land, there's been a petition. And so now your property finds itself in the watershed of a proposed municipal drain. And this is how it goes. I had a conversation with another person just a few weeks ago too, who was talking about the historic drainage map. The municipality didn't have this land in a watershed, but there was a new petition. And because there's a new petition and there's new drainage works required, then there is a new catchment that gets drawn for that drainage works. And so that brings new parcels into the drain. So, yep, you're right. And that would be my response.
Joel, I have to say I'm frustrated a little bit because I did not ask for you to, I know you have to fill out the ditch, but this is private property. If it would have been fixed many years ago, I don't think I would have had to pay that. There's erosion that you have to fix. So my question is, yes, I will end up with more yardage, whatever. I did not ask for that. I was happy with my ditch. I don't mind the ditch. I don't need to have more lawn to mow. I'm happy with that. And I have to, you've assessed me something that I don't really want. So I'm stuck paying that. The thing is, it's because I have 0.02 of water that goes in that ditch. You're giving me the cost of new lawn. I'm having more property, which I don't want. I have enough right now. I don't need to have an extra ditch. The only reason I'm doing this, it's because it fixes everybody's problem. And yet the municipality has put water in a private ditch for years when you had no right to do that with, I don't want to go there still, but the Ministry of Agriculture had advised the municipality, you don't go on private property. It opens a can of worms, which you did for years and years. And now I'm stuck to pay a bill. I would have assumed I would pay for the benefit of my water that goes there. My property drains in the river. It's very, very obvious. I'm built on a slope, it goes down. So I don't need that ditch. I don't need that. I can't say I don't need it, but I mean, I don't really need it. And I don't think, I'm frustrated because I'm being charged for something that I never asked. I don't want more land. I don't care about more land. I have enough. So I have to, I'll have to talk, I'll have to see because I'm not impressed.
Okay, no, fair enough.
Yeah.
I hear that. And, you know, and I recognize that when a drain is built, especially a new one for the first time, it brings in, you know, new landowners, and the dilemma we were facing in your case was what to do about the issue, because we all agreed there was an issue, right? And it needed to be rectified. And the municipalities, you know, not in a position to go on private land and do work privately on private landowners unless there's been some easement or, you know, specific conveyance that they're charged with maintaining. And so the decision that was made in this case is to create a legal outlet, address the issues at hand, and improve the situation, address the concerns that were identified, and get a legal outlet for this watershed. Now, as for the assessment, I recognize that you may disagree with how I've calculated the assessment. And there will be, you know, more information in my report as to the basis for that calculation. And that would be the venue, that would be what the Court of Revision venue provides, is a place for assessments to be appealed and altered, potentially, right? So I appreciate what you're saying 100%. I've done the best I could to assess it in a way that is consistent with how I've assessed other properties for benefit as well.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
Just it's frustrating because I did not ask to have that extra land. I don't want that.
Yeah.
I don't need it.
Yep.
It's just like,
Yeah.
my property is big enough.
Yeah.
But I know what you mean. It should, it should
There's
increase the value of my property. That's what you mean. Going forward, doing that, it should increase the value of my property because I won't have a ditch. I will have, it's all going to be clean. It's what,
clean
so
and
I'm
stable.
gonna go at Diane's and I'm gonna go have picnic on her side then, because we're gonna be all one big lawn now.
No,
There you
no,
go.
now you're gonna cut all the grass. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah, so it
Yeah.
is, no, I have to let it sink in because I
Yes.
was not expecting that, to be honest. I was not expecting that at all, so.
Yep. No, I appreciate that. I hear what you're saying. And that's one of the, I think, values of a meeting like this, is to put the information out there, you know, so that you have some time to digest it and
Okay.
I have a chance to explain it. Any other questions?
Yes, I have one. If this issue came up a long time ago and there was water drained to the east drain or to that area, historically for a long time, is this not something that should have been dealt with a long time ago instead of now, especially at the increased prices of everything? This obviously the water was never ever planned to drain off of this this new orange catchment that you have?
Well, yeah, no, that's a good question. The ditch has been there a long time,
Yes.
right? And so, you know, it's a little hard to see, but even here in 1989, the presence of that ditch is shown. And so it is the case everywhere in Ontario that water runs somewhere. It runs downhill, and it's fine until it's not fine. And I think the reality is, fine is a subjective word. And so in this case, historically, it was accepted that Linda and Dennis were not under any legal obligation to accept it. Under common law, they could bring in some dirt tomorrow and dump a few loads of fill in the head of the gully and flood the road. Under common law of drainage, that's an option. Then there's the civil action option, where we fool around trying to decide who's suffered damage and what those amounts are. Or in a case like this, where something historically was fine and was accepted, is no longer acceptable. And so that was what was brought to the municipality's attention. And those were those discussions that I alluded to in the summer of 2019. And that was when the petition was signed there in the fall of 2019 to implement a forward-looking solution to a situation that had become not fine. So the Drainage Act is not punitive. It takes a situation at a snapshot in time. It doesn't look into hindsight to say necessarily who did or did not do what. You know, like I say, we had a drainage pattern that was accepted by the downstream landowners. And when the municipality became aware that it was not fine anymore, it was not a stable slope, it could not just be allowed to continue. Discussions were had, and this was determined to be the best course of action. So it's, you know, municipal drains often start because there's a drainage problem. And so I can appreciate that it's not an easy answer necessarily, but it was the option available. So, yep. Any other questions? This has been some good conversation, and I hope the information has been helpful. My information's there on the screen, so if you'd like to get together tomorrow, I will have some time on site and some availability, so I'll be in touch with you.
Joel?
Yeah.
It's Melanie. I just wanted to firstly apologize for the inability to live stream it. Our IT guy wasn't able to figure it out either, but I will be posting this meeting. I did record it, and I will be posting this meeting tomorrow to the YouTube channel. So anyone who wasn't able to attend the meeting and wants to view this meeting and get the information that was shared tonight will be able to do so probably by midday tomorrow.
Okay. Excellent. Sounds good. I'm going to stop sharing the screen here because I believe I'm more or less done talking. I probably said too much. I think it's time for the closing ceremonies, and for our closing ceremonies, John Lindley was proposing an interpretive dance.
You don't want to see that, folks.
Okay, never mind. I don't have anything to say. Anything else from you, Melanie? Okay.
So no, nothing. And I guess everyone who might want to meet with you tomorrow on site can do so, can reach out to you directly.
Yep.
What time tomorrow?
First part of the day for sure is preferred on my end. The weather's looking a little squirrely further south. So first part of the day would be preferred. And I'll just, again, mention my cell phone number if you didn't jot it down, 519-496-4968. If you'd like to send me a text tonight, and we'll set something up for tomorrow.
And if anybody doesn't have a pen or whatever, you can always give me a call in the morning and I can give you the information.
Yep.
All right.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good
everyone. Good night.